Okay, welcome back to another video for the Lily Pad. We are in the year 3 series. One of the things I wanted to talk about that I've been studying over the last few years is habits, right? I didn't realize how important it was um, to understand habits and how they work together to shape our lives. Like on the conscious level, right? You understand it, right? And you think about, okay, I have these bad habits, I need to change them. But sometimes we don't realize, like, once we get into the routine of a habit, it becomes a biological function for us to just kind of keep those habits. And that's some of what we'll talk about in this video so that you can understand that sometimes when you can't change a habit, it's not because you're lazy or unmotivated or all these things. It's really just a biological response in that you'll have to be way more intentional about changing some of the habitual patterns in your life, right? So let's start off by defining what a habit is. So habits are automatic behaviors. They don't require a lot of intention, right? They occur in response to environmental cues like time of day or location. Essentially, your brain forms an association between a specific context or a specific behavior. You then execute that behavior, the ritual or habit, in the context without even thinking about it. So, habit might be things like checking your email as soon as you get to work in the morning, walking a certain route home every evening, chewing your fingernails when you're nervous, or scrolling through your social media news feed when you hop in bed at night. And that is that last example is really hard for a bunch of people. I have a lot of anxious clients that can't go to bed at night. And the first thing they do is they grab things that stimulate them so much that they just can't get to sleep, and then or they have so much in their head that their mind continues to race instead of just power down. So habits like this form when you receive a reward for the behavior, and like Pavlov's dog, you might not even realize you're learning something new. And so Pavlov is just this really big experiment they talk about in psychology, where you just transfer, basically you'll continue to do a behavior if you're rewarded for it, right? So if you look on social media and you can get a laugh, or you can get, some kind of emotional positive connection or information, whatever it is, you'll feel a certain way about it and continue. um One of the things I learned about habits also is that when you're exposed to something enjoyable, your brain releases a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Um, this dopamine rush makes you feel good. So it basically incentivizes you to repeat that behavior in order to get rewarded with that dopamine again. So dopamine is like the same kind of pleasure. It's in the same pleasure center as people who have drug addiction, food addiction, alcohol addiction. All of it is right there together. So what'll happen, like once you get rewarded, over time, that association between the context, behavior, and the rewards get stored in your brain, and you will continue it, right? And everything will be associated with those emotions. And you'll start to learn that, oh, if I do this thing, I feel happy or I feel good in some way. So I'm going to continue it, right? So, in the simplest things, if someone gets up and drinks coffee every day, right? They get up, they make their coffee, they sit outside on their patio, right? And they look at the birds and the trees and everything before they start work. That's a habit. That, it sounds like a normal everyday routine. But if they go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, um, if you keep drinking caffeine, you'll put your heart at risk or something like that. That's going to be a hard habit for someone to break, because although it seems like, okay, it's not a big deal to go out there, drink your coffee, look at the birds, look at the trees, but you enjoyed it. It felt good. It felt pleasurable. It felt peaceful. And to try to break that routine may be hard. Now, if you could keep now, and it also depends on how much pleasure in that you got from certain pieces of the reward. So if the coffee wasn't that big of a deal, what can you put in its place? You can go decaf, or you can pick a decaffeinated tea or something if the rest of the habit was more important than the actual coffee and caffeine. Okay. So I also want to say that habits will continue even though the reward ends, right? So if you don't even feel pleasure anymore, after a certain time, that habit will continue, because you've already taught yourself that this is what we do in the morning, right? There are some people who get up and work out in the morning that absolutely hate it, but but because it's an ingrained habit. Let's say if your parents are like, "Oh, okay, when you wake up in the morning, the whole family's going for a run, or ride a bike, whatever." It's become such a routine. Um, that you don't have the pleasure of like that family time together, but you go because again, it's a learned behavior. So studies have researched people um, just kind of changing habits, and one of them is about taking the stairs instead of the elevator. So the researchers tried to educate people about the benefit of using stairs, um, and it made no difference, right? And so, at one point in the research, the elevator doors closed 16 seconds slower, just to give people enough um, inconvenience to nudge them to walk. Um, And what they found is that people would continue their routine. It didn't matter. They would stick to their habit, right? And so again, that's how ingrained, and that's how just kind of again ingrained we are in regards to habits. So habits are rarely changed by knowledge, planning, and willpower, right? Remember that habits are stored in the area of the brain where again it's centered around that pleasure principle. It's centered around procedural memories and basic life functions. So once you learn how to ride a bike, you're not going to forget it. So your habits are stored kind of in that area also. So it's going to cause a lot of stress for some people when they try to change habits, right? It's also stored in the same area with emotions. And so that's the reason why it'll cause some stress for some, or it'll be so difficult, or you have that guilt shame cycle when you can't change habit. So a lot of our habits, again, are stored in that area and are considered somewhat primal. So in early evolution, the only thing we focused on was feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproduction. And now, because of that natural instinct, the habits are ingrained into that. Okay. So what tripped me up a little bit is because I didn't want to put these two together, but that's the reason why willpower won't work, because you're trying to will yourself against something that's natural, right? Something that's just um a part of who you are as a person. And I don't mean to say any of that to say that you can't change your habits. You can. But I do want you to understand that sometimes you can have as much knowledge as you want about a thing. Like I used to work with a lady who went to the doctor and she had diabetes, and they told her she was starting to have some really serious symptoms in regards to diabetes. And they told her, hey, they put her in classes, they told her she would die, they told her all these things. And she still had a very difficult time changing her eating habits because she had just learned that, I mean, it was pleasurable, and she had learned that food was a way to soothe her issues, right? That she would feel better somehow, even temporarily, if she continued to eat the way she did. At one point I can remember her saying, "Well, I'm just going to enjoy food until I die." And that was a very amazing statement to me because I was like, that might be sooner than later if you don't change this habit. And that's all it was. So, so also like the way our brain is set up, and I'm going to try to explain this in the simplest way as to not confuse you. So, all of the stuff where I said about habits and where it's settled, like in the emotions, in that same area of the brain. So that area of the brain is the prehistoric. So we're going to call that the adult brain. The prefrontal cortex, which is where willpower is very, very new, and it's like a teenager or a child brain. If you think about that in a sense, you're a teenager and child will hardly ever override an adult. The adult will always be in charge. And so willpower living in that prefrontal cortex, that child brain, the adult brain is gonna be like, I don't care what you're saying. I'm gonna do what I want to because this is the thing that has kept me alive and has kept me safe. I don't care what you're saying, right? So it's just going to take some time, some discipline, and some intention to change habits. And we're going to just kind of talk about that now. So, changing habits. So, one of the best ways to change a habit is to replace it with a new one. This means you must complete a new behavior in a given context, get a reward, and repeat, right? So, a lot of times what people don't understand about habits, we have difficulty changing them also because there's if there's no pleasure, if there's no greater pleasure in the habit we already have, then I'm not going to do it. But then if it's one of the older habits that are already learned, it's a process to unlearn, if that makes sense. um of course it's easier said than done, like that sounds simple but it really isn't. So forming a new habit is challenging because again the friction barrier gets in the way, meaning I you I this is normal for me. I'm happy here. I don't really want to change anything, and you're telling me I need to change. And what happens is like this biological response to it is like, hmm, again, I'm safe here. I feel comfortable. If you try to get me away from what I'm used to doing, then that may signal to my brain that I'm in danger or something is disrupted and I'm not going to respond well, right? So there's that. But even with all that said, you can change the habit. You just have to make a new reward or the reward greater for what you're getting now. So, meaning if the people, like you take the stairs examples, even with the inconvenience of the door closing slower, people still took the elevator, right? But if you gave them a financial incentive or competition to take the stairs, more people probably would have taken the stairs because it's like, oh, I can get $1 each stair. Gotcha. I'm on those stairs, right? So, one of the ways to create a helpful environment in regards to changing habits is and overcome that friction is to create an environment that makes the new behavior easy and rewarding. The new environment ideally will reduce old cues that led to the bad habits and increase cues that lead to the new helpful habits, right? So, one of the really important things about behavior change is that you have to work with what's around you, right? So, don't make anything too big because it'll become too cumbersome and the reward will outrate your desire. The not reward, but the work will outweigh the reward, and then you don't want to do it. So, um, and you also want to create an environment that would make it easier for you to actually achieve the goal, right? So some of that is not making a big change fast. Sometimes you need to make small incremental changes before you make the big change or make the small incremental changes that will eventually add up to the big change, right? So when you create the helpful environment, um, It's where your planning and your planning and thinking comes into play, right? So if going to the gym is a hassle and you don't like it, find an at-home exercise routine you actually enjoy and leave your exercise clothes and equipment out in a convenient, obvious spot. If you want to start reading before bed instead of checking your phone, consider charging your phone overnight in a spot out of reach. And I tell clients that all the time. But I want to hop back to the gym. The gym thing is really important because what people don't understand, if I give my brain room to think, my brain is going to talk me out of that new habit because, again, that friction is uncomfortable psychologically. So my brain is going to say, I don't want to do that. That feels uncomfortable. So giving my brain a chance to say, I don't want to do that, and it'll take that much time to say, I don't want to do that, while you're looking for an outfit to wear, while you're looking for your shoes, while you're looking for your keys and things like that. So make it very, very easy, for you to just kind of access the things you need, to gain access, is what I was trying to say, to gain access to the things you need so that you don't give your brain enough time to create that friction. Another thing people do is what's called habit stacking. So you stack a new habit onto a habit you already have, right? And so if you like listening to podcasts or you like binge watching Netflix, this is a better example. I read a book where a man was saying that in order to add walking to or exercise to his routine, and he loved to binge watch shows. That was his favorite. And so he was like, if I binge watch, I'm gonna walk and watch the first couple of episodes in the season, and I'm not allowed to watch any other season any other episode unless I'm walking. And I thought, oh, that's really creative. Like, that's really cool because he'll still get the reward of watching that television show. And if he's disciplined enough not to watch the other episodes until he walks, that's really a good habit stack. That's why you see people will walk into podcasts, or the reason why people went from, I don't know, I'm so old, but I remember when treadmills didn't have the television music or any of that. It was just like a treadmill or a bike. But now, if you notice, there's all sorts of televisions, technologies, and things on um, the treadmills and the bikes because they know people would be more likely to do it if a television or music or something was associated. Um, there are even what what is it called? There's even treadmills with locations. Well, you can walk in downtown Chicago on your treadmill. You'll see it on the monitor. I really love it. That's my favorite one. That's why I can remember it. Um, so even with me when I'm walking, that's super helpful. And so know too that you can use your habits to your advantage, right? Sometimes, I know that we've talked about habits and the main thing we've talked about is those bad habits. But habits are also good, right? Like professional athletes have habits. They get up, they work out, they eat right, they do all these things that will just kind of um promote them being the best at what they do. I've even heard of writers who get up every day and write, and they'll free write for 30 minutes to an hour, right? That's a good habit because an idea will strike from that, something will come from that. And so, the latter part of this video, I want to talk about James Clear. He wrote this book called Atomic Habits. And initially, I was like, when I first saw the book, of course, judge a book by its cover. I was like, ugh, atomic. I was thinking big, like the atom bomb. And I was like, oh, that's just, why would you write a book, doing this like you're setting people up for failure? And then I just decided to read the book. Um, not too long ago. And when I read it, I was like, oh, I missed an opportunity to just, really just a chance to educate my clients because I didn't educate myself. Like I was really judgmental about it. But James has a really good book, again, Atomic Habits, about changing, making those small incremental changes, understanding the biology of change and the biology of habits, explaining it to you in a really easy way. So that you can understand I can do this, right? So one of the things he tells you is to do is plan for chaos, right? So the example he uses is if you have a goal that you want to stick to in regards to working out, like I want to work out 3 times per week or meditate for 5 minutes each morning. If everything goes as planned, then you're sticking to your goal. It's not that difficult, right? If you wake up on time, then you should be able to get an extra 5 minutes to meditate. If rush hour traffic isn't bad, then you should be able to make it in the gym before going to your kids' performance. But what happens if chaos ensues? And then we also have to know too, like if we're creating a habit and we have a routine down, one of the things he said, and I thought was really helpful because I've noticed this in myself in the past, if you miss one day, don't mix the next. Because when you miss the next, it gives your brain a chance to create fiction, right? That not fiction, but that friction, right? And once you create that friction, your brain is going to go right back to what it knows biologically. I don't like it. I might not feel safe. And I think a better way to explain that, I think it was James who said this. I'm not really sure. But I love this um, knowledge because it has helped me help clients. Biologically, we are not set up to be really active people, right? And I know that seems crazy because so many of us are active. But the distinction he made was that if you look at animals in the jungle, or if, I feel like maybe I said this part, but if you look at animals in the jungle, you don't see them move a lot. Like if you watch National Geographic or you've gone to the zoo, if you just kind of aware of animal behavior, they don't move a lot. They move when it's time to hunt, when they play, um, and just if they're moving locations, but like other than that, like even my dog, like she'll move from one location to the other and plop down. She sleeps more than any being I've ever known on this planet. But biologically, we're set up the same way, right? So a lot of people they struggle with the idea of being lazy, and it's not laziness, it's natural, right? So asking yourself to move and be motivated can be seen as unnatural. It's not, but it can be seen as unnatural if you're looking at the biologies of who we are as humans, right? Or as animals. So I just want to make that note. However, because we're energetic people and that's better for us because that's how we survive in this world, it's better to be active than not active, especially with the food that's being produced for us to eat now. And I don't even want to get on that soapbox. But anyway, let's go back to the chaos. So chaos is just like that unpredictability of life, and it's one of the factors that makes sticking to your goals difficult. So have a plan. Have a plan when chaos ensues, but again, don't miss more than one day because that's going to cause a problem. um, Reduce the scope and stick to the schedule, right? So you're going to plan to fail if you wake up one day. And I'm not saying this goes for everybody because just like people who can quit alcohol, marijuana, and smoking in one day, throw their hands up and say, I'm done, there are people who can also do that when it comes to habit. However, for a good portion of people, it's not that simple. And so reduce the scope and stick to the plan. So if you are saying, you know what, I need to change my eating. If you go in your cupboard and your refrigerator and throw away all the things you're quote unquote not supposed to have, it's going to be 2 or 3 days before you go back and get the things that you're not supposed to have, right? You would have wasted that money. And then what's going to happen too is when you start eating it, it starts this whole guilt shame cycle that then further makes you want to eat further. And it just starts this cycle. And honestly, that's a whole other video. Um, but when you reduce the scope and say, okay, I'm not going to change how I eat now, but what I would like to do is stop eating sugar for a while. And the reason why I said stop eating it for a while is if you tell your brain you can never have sugar again, sugar is going to be the only thing it thinks about, and sugar is going to be the only thing it wants. And you're going to wake up and hear sugar. You're going to walk around the house and hear sugar. You're going to go to bed at night and your brain is going to be like sugar, 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 sugar. So the best thing to do is not tell your brain it can't have a certain thing. You'll just tell your brain I can't have it right now. That is very simplistic, meaning it sounds simple, but it is not, and it's going to take work. But again, that's a whole other video. Um, so it's continuing to tell yourself to try to unlearn those habits. So if another habit is if I say that I'm going to get up every day and meditate, then I can't say I'm just going to get up every day and meditate like I just said. What I would have to say instead is I'm going to get up every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at 5 a.m. and meditate for 5 minutes. Be intentional. Be like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what date and time I'm going to do it. Because if it's broad, then your brain doesn't commit. It doesn't commit, it won't commit, and then when you start to do it, you'll give yourself again opportunity to create that fiction, right? So there's also a technique that James mentioned called the if and then technique. He says that's a perfect way to just kind of plan for the chaos and stick to your goals even when life gets crazy, right? If and then forces you to create a strategy for reducing the scope but sticking to the schedule before you actually need to do so, right? So, if something unexpected happens, then you have to have a response. So, here's an example. If I don't wake up in time to run tomorrow, then I'll run after work. If I can't make it to yoga during my lunch break, then I'll take a stretching break this afternoon. If I buy something unhealthy for lunch, then I'll cook a healthy dinner, right? So to me, the if and then is a wonderful technique because even though you may not be doing the exact thing that you said you would do that day, you're doing something. And your brain doesn't have time to relax and say, ooh, we could do nothing. No, we can't do nothing because no matter what happens, I'm going to do something. Right. And so another portion of that, he says you can also use the if and then technique as a way to plan for poor performances as well, right? So, example, a basketball player could say, if I miss 10 free throws at practice, then I'll visualize myself making 20 free throws before I fall asleep tonight, right? So, going over the practice deliberately in your brain will just kind of help you. It'll also get you in the mindset of visualizing yourself doing something successful. And I am one of those people who think visualization is very helpful. When you feel like you can do something, when you know you're capable of something and you visually put yourself there, then you start to make steps. You start to make steps in, okay, what do I do next? How do I do this? Who do I need to contact? Um, those doing those things can be very important in regards to um, creating a habit, a system. Um, One of the things too, like a part of like creating a habit is failure, right? Because I want to bring back, I've said this in several other videos, changing is not linear, it's a cycle, meaning failure is a part of change. So if you fail, what is the saying? They say if you fail, try again. I really mean that when it comes to creating a habit or anything else that you do in your life. Failure is a part of growth. Failure is a part of change. Because it balances, right? And so understand that If it doesn't work on Tuesday, it may work on Wednesday. If it doesn't work on Wednesday, it may work on Thursday, but it'll never work as long as you don't try. It'll never work as long as you don't commit. So, when your habits make up your life, so if your habit is, I get up, I go to the living room, I watch television, I eat processed foods all day, I don't walk, I don't take care of myself. And I'm not saying that in a judgmental way, but what I'm saying is all the way that sounds is that you're not connected to your body, right? If you're not exercising, if you're not watching what you eat, and I don't mean that in the sense of like diet culture, but I mean that in the sense that some of the food we eat can be heavy on us, right? It can make us feel sick. It can make us feel just sometimes nauseous, lethargic, and we don't notice it because we're eating so much of it and we're eating so much of it, but we're disconnected from our body, so we can't feel what's going on. And I know that sounds weird, but if I know that if I have regular sugar in the morning, I can feel the difference in that than than if I have Splenda in the morning. If I eat too much chocolate, I start to feel a certain way, and it's because I'm just really connected to my body. I'm not 100% there, but I'm getting to the point where I am becoming more and more connected, and I can feel those things that don't serve me well. And so create what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is create habits that serve you well, that keep you connected to your body mentally and emotionally. We spoke about scanning your body in the last video, or a couple of videos back. I can't remember, but doing that will is very, very helpful, and it'll help you understand things that you need to change, that you want to change. But when it comes to change, last thing, be compassionate, be kind to yourself, give yourself grace, and understand that this isn't a perfect process and you will fail. So, alrighty, we'll talk to you guys again. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.